You're
Good
very
morning. Yes,
to,
it's a pleasure to be here.
yes, to this edition of AfS Live, Alliance for Science Live. And today we are going to talk about growing food without soil, which you are calling hydroponics. And to our listeners, both on Zoom and those who are watching us live on Facebook, you're very welcome. As I introduce Professor Trevor Charles, I would request that you invite more people. Anyone whom you know that may be interested in this topic, quickly invite them, send the link to them on Facebook, and tell them, come quickly, we're about to start discussing the future of agriculture. Today we have Professor, is that right, Trevor? Professor?
Yes, yes.
So today on AfS Live, we have Professor Trevor Charles, and he's the Chief Science Officer at Metagenom Bio, and he's also the Director of Waterloo Centre for Microbial Research. Waterloo is Waterloo University, but I am sure if I have introduced him in any way that is not proper, he will introduce himself properly. If there are some terms that I have mispronounced, he will also correct that. So Trevor, you're very welcome, and let us start with this discussion.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Patricia, and it's a really great honor to be here today to tell you about some of the work that we're doing in hydroponics and how we see this really a big picture vision for how we can grow food. So maybe I'll just get started with sharing some slides here. I just have a few introductory slides. Let's see if this works. Does everybody see that? Okay. Yeah, so really the way that we approach hydroponics is from the role of microbiome. And we have this new project called Healthy Hydroponics. Really, I want to start with just giving an idea of what can be considered hydroponics. So hydroponics is simply growing plants without soil, where you have the nutrients that are distributed through water. And you know, a lot of people think about hydroponics and they say, oh, you're using water directly to grow the plants. You must use a lot more water than plants growing in the soil. When in fact, the opposite is true. Because you give the plants the exact amount of water that they need and the nutrients that they need when they need it, and that water can be recycled in many cases, you only need a fraction of the water. And there's many different types of hydroponic systems. So on this slide here, we have some examples from Microbiomes Alliance, where we're showing vertical farming, greenhouses, container farming, aquaponics, where you have growing fish as well, and other types of seafood, and aeroponics, where you can use a mist. And we even have here an example of growing vegetables in hydroponic systems on the space station. So even in outer space, there are opportunities for food production. So when I say that, or ask the question, can hydroponics feed the world? And you know, the answer is that it already is. Here's an example from Canada, where I live. In Canada, half of the vegetables produced are produced in greenhouses, and almost all of those have hydroponic systems. But the land use is much less than for field-grown crops. So about 1,500 hectares devoted to greenhouse production of vegetables in Canada, compared to 100,000 hectares of field production for essentially the same amount of production. So that gives really a good illustration of what the efficiency of hydroponic production can be. hydroponics really can be anywhere. This is right in the city center of Bangkok, where you have and leafy greens being produced under hydroponic conditions. Typically, you know, these are automated systems where this is in a Canadian greenhouse where, you know, you've got these systems for distributing the nutrient solution. And there's also a lot of data that can be collected. So we're talking about precision agriculture. This is really ultra precision agriculture. So we're really interested in the microbiome. So when people think about the plant microbiome, they often think of soil. So soil is, you know, very rich in microbes. It's probably the most diverse environment or habitat on Earth in terms of microbiology. But of course, in hydroponic systems, there's no soil. So what does this mean? Really, we don't even know what the microbiome in the hydroponic systems looks like. And so this is one of the things that we really want to do. So what is a core microbiome? And so when we talk about the microbiome, these are microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, fungi, all of those interesting small creatures that we can't see with our eye, but are really having an effect on our life. As we see, of course, with COVID-19, the microbe is having a huge impact on the world. One single microbe. You know, microbes cause diseases in plants, but they also help plants to grow healthy. And there are microbes that can inhibit those disease-causing organisms, and there are microbes that can help the plants to respond or survive different types of stress. And so, you know, in the soil, it's very, very difficult to change the microbiology of the soil. But if you are precisely designing the nutrient solution that you're applying to your plants, what you can do is you can actually design that microbiome as well. So you can put just the right microbes in there that will have the best effect on the plants. And you can also monitor the microbiome to see how it's changing in these hydroponic systems and make sure that it's in tip-top shape. So I think that's what I wanted to do for introduction. And I'd be happy to continue the discussion if anybody has any questions. Oh, actually, one other thing I wanted to do. Maybe can I do that?
Sure, you can share your screen again.
Yeah, let me try, because I wanted to sort of introduce this other big picture idea, I think. So slideshow. Okay. So one of the things that we've been thinking about, and we put together this view of circular economy. So one of the big challenges with hydroponics is that the energy requirements and the inputs, especially if you have a closed or relatively closed system like a greenhouse or an indoor farm that has artificial lighting. So the energy costs can be quite high. One of the things that we can do is we can sort of situate that. So here's our greenhouse within a circular bioeconomy concept. And what we're doing is we're linking that to food waste. So the idea that you can capture food waste from food services or from the consumer or from processing, you can use different types of microbiological processes to convert that into inputs that can be used in our case here to make things like bioplastics, but you can also get fertilizer essentially, so phosphorus and nitrogen, and you can also generate biogas that can be inputs as energy inputs and as CO2 into a greenhouse, a hydroponic system. You can also get water as well. And so this is an example of how you can use food waste through the use of hydroponics to make more food for human consumption. So that's sort of an idea here of circular bioeconomy. So I just wanted to introduce that concept. I think you're muted, Patricia.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I have quite a number of questions. How do you power your greenhouses, your hydroponic systems that you're using in Waterloo?
Yeah, so in Ontario, so most of the hydroponic systems are greenhouses. And one of the big challenges that they actually have is that the electricity requirements are quite high. So the power requirements are quite high. And so, you know, can you use alternative source of energy? Or can you reduce the energy requirements? So those are some of the big challenges that need to be addressed. And I think that for a lot of, there's a lot of examples where inexpensive, readily available energy is what will really transform a lot of aspects of our life. But, you know, when we go to places like, you know, we do some work in Southeast Asia, there's a lot of hydroponic systems that are not completely self-contained, and the energy requirements are fairly low there. And there are examples where you can run hydroponic systems without electricity. So there's a hydroponics project in Kenya that is actually developing, has developed commercially systems that can run without electricity.
And they're running on solar? What is power?
So from what I've seen, you can actually use manual methods to ensure that that you have the distribution of the nutrient solution. So you know, very simple technology can be adapted to the system when you think that all it is that you need to have water moving from one place to another.
Okay. So there is a question here from Patrick McMullen, and he's saying, are some biologicals like bacillus and I don't know how to pronounce the other word. I would like all our attendees and people watching us to know that I am not a scientist, I am a journalist. I speak English, not this language of yours. So are some biologicals, such as bacillus, trichoderma, etc., as effective in hydroponics as soil?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. You know, there are often, so greenhouse growers, they often will add some of those bacillus or trichoderma, which incidentally are not necessarily the best types of inoculants that could be added to the system. So for example, if you look at operating hydroponic systems, you know, there's been very few microbiome surveys of those systems, but it turns out that there's really hardly any bacillus in there, so naturally. So they really look more like aquatic systems than they look like soil systems. But nevertheless, often you have bacillus added to these systems just because most of the inoculant products are bacillus. But the types of organisms that actually do much better in these systems are organisms like Monas, or you know, some of the gram-negative organisms that are often found there, and a lot of them are able to they have traits that allow them to reduce stress in the plants and allow the plants to grow much better.
Okay. So from what you've been telling us, Trevor, it looks like vegetables are the only crops that people are generally growing inside, using this hydroponic system. Can it be used for any other crops other than vegetables?
Yeah, so I've seen, for example, it being used to produce fodder for animals, but that's not really in wide use. And really, you wouldn't want to use it to produce corn or soybean or wheat or rice or something like that, where production on land is really going to be much more efficient. But you want to take advantage of the production under conditions where, or in situations where you would like to have a steady supply of fresh vegetables for the population. And, you know, in Canada, there are projects where they're producing fresh vegetables under hydroponic systems in northern and indigenous communities, and they can produce it year round. And, you know, those are very insecure regions, and often it's very difficult to find nutritious food. And so, you know, this is the type of example where we'd like to do that. Or, you know, in the Canadian example, being able to produce vegetables year round so that you have fresh vegetables available. Or if you want to produce it in urban environments in the city, right next to your restaurant where you're actually serving it. You know, there's a lot of really great opportunities like that.
So is it safe to say that hydroponics as a system is more efficient in areas where there is limited access to land, where you need and urban areas where you need a continuous supply of fruits and vegetables?
Yeah,
but
I think
you're in a situation where, you know, you have this huge expanse of land, then hydroponics may not be as efficient.
Yeah, or you know, if you're growing grain, I mean, grains do not need to be maintained fresh, right? For them to be consumed. They're processed afterwards and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
So this is really a good innovation for urban farming.
Yes, urban farming is so often. You know, there's a lot of examples where you have indoor farms and vertical farms where the systems don't use natural light. They just use very highly efficient LED lights. And those can be built anywhere.
But when it comes to applicability beyond the research institute, beyond, let's say, universities. At Waterloo, you have this new big project and you're studying microbiomes in this system. But at the end of the day, I'm sure you want it to be widely adapted. How?
Yeah, so.
And let's talk about the average urban farmer. How cost effective is it? Let's not talk about that you'll be saving water, but I'm thinking about the initial cost of setting up this system. How expensive or affordable is it?
Yeah, so the initial cost is one of the big challenges. And, you know, just as an example, in Canada, where we have cannabis is legalized, you actually see that most of the cannabis that's produced is produced under these types of systems. And the reason is because the value of the crop is so much greater than for vegetables. So the cost of the construction of these very large greenhouses is not as much of a factor. So the capital requirements are not as great. But you know, you can produce very efficiently with fairly small systems, right? So the capital requirements for those systems will, of course, not be as great. You're not going to have as much output. So it's scalable, really, in both directions.
Let's imagine anyone who is watching us or listening wants to set up a small hydroponic system. They can I suppose, how can they reach out to you experts? They can just come to your website. Do you have some prototypes set up on your website?
Yep.
Some manuals somewhere?
Yeah, so we focus mostly on the microbiome, but we have operations in Singapore that do actually design and build indoor farms. And so in that case, those are larger systems, so it's mostly commercial. But there are a lot of examples where you can purchase small scale systems. I bought one to run in my backyard to grow tomatoes this summer. And so there's a lot of examples of technology that's readily available off the shelf, so to speak.
So let me get you right, Trevor. What your team at Waterloo is doing is studying the microorganisms needed
That's right.
to effectively run a hydroponic system. And after
Yes.
you have studied that, then do you go ahead and make the mixture, the concoction, and make these microorganisms available to producers?
Yes, exactly right.
Okay.
Really a two-pronged approach. So one is to be able to survey the microbes that are present in the system so that you can detect when disease-causing organisms are there, right? So pathogens. You can detect when food safety organisms, sorry, disease-causing, so human disease-causing organisms, which would be a food safety problem. So you can detect those. You can also detect when beneficial microbes are there. And all of that is done using DNA sequencing technology. But then the next step is, once you know what these systems look like, can you add microbes so that, and specific types of microbes, so that you have a healthy functioning system that has an optimal microbiome that will resist disease and that will help the plants to grow better.
Okay. Kathleen Heffron from Facebook is asking, how do you handle plant diseases?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Hi, Kathleen, how are you doing? How do we handle plant diseases? So our approach really is to be able to detect the diseases first before they become a problem. And then there's a lot of examples of technology that is used to treat the water. So it's sort of a trade-off between promoting a healthy microbiome, or promoting the healthy microbiology within the system, and then using techniques like ozonation or UV to control the amount of microbes that are present. And then there's also the opportunity to use biocontrol organisms, so bacteria that have antifungal activity, for example. So many of the diseases are fungal diseases. So these can be added to the system and maintained in the system to ensure that those diseases are kept under control.
Okay, we have another question from one of our listeners from Zoom, and he or she is asking, are the microbiomes genetically modified or natural?
That's a very good question. So at the moment, they are not genetically modified. So they are natural. But I think that in the future, we might be able to develop microbes that are genetically modified that will work even better, and that will be able to associate with the plant very closely. That's an area of active research right now. But of course, there is this public hesitancy in that area that you always have to be aware of. But I don't know, is the general public afraid of eating plants that have had genetically modified microbes applied to them? I don't know. I don't think there's been much of a conversation about that.
As a consumer of vegetables representing the general public here, I don't think it would be a concern to me because I also don't know what is in the soil. All I have been told is that black soil is fertile and it's good for growing crops. So any crop that has been grown in the soil, I will eat it. So why then would I then become uncomfortable with a crop or a vegetable that has been grown in a hydroponic system? But you never know. If anyone, maybe one of our participants, viewers, can tell us if that is something that could make them cringe and want to find out what microbiomes are in the hydroponic system that has grown their vegetable. But Trevor, let me take you back to the issue of water. You said the hydroponic system uses just a fraction of water. Qualify that for us.
So just so
what do you
give
mean
you an example how much? But just a fraction. So there's so many different systems out there, but there are reports where it's been shown that you can reduce water use by 80 or 90% or more. And even there's examples of large-scale greenhouses where they so far as to trap the water that condenses on the top of the greenhouse and bring that back into the system, right? So these can be very highly efficient where, every last drop is used.
So have you tried this in areas that are predominantly low on water, let's say in desert communities?
So we haven't ourselves, but there are, I think a really great example is that there are some big projects recently built in the UAE.
Okay.
So in desert regions where water really is a concern, it is very that they're apparently working quite well there.
Other than water, what is the hydroponic advantage over, let's say, soil farming?
Yeah, actually, one that a lot of people don't think about is that you don't have to worry about weeds.
Okay.
Because there's the weeds can't get into the system, and so you don't need herbicides. You don't need to remove weeds by hand or whatever other methods are used, and I think that's a huge advantage. I think people discount the impact of weeds in agriculture.
Okay, yeah, that's quite a huge advantage actually, because weeds also account for quite for a big chunk of labor costs in the production of any crop. So that's also a cost that has been done away with. Anyway,
although I mean, you raised an interesting point there about labor. So these can require a lot of labor because they're very intensive, but then there are also opportunities for automating systems so that they actually require very little labor. So there's a big range there that's possible.
Okay. So you have told us how you've worked with some producers, commercial producers in Singapore. Is there any, and also Canada? We now know that hydroponic vegetables grown using this system account for close to 50% of vegetables in Canada. Yep. How do we see this in other regions? Let's talk about Africa, where we are also wanting to innovate as much as possible. Urban farming is also picking up. Do you have any examples where this is being used?
Yep. So the one. Yeah, so there is a project, a company in Kenya that I mentioned but I don't have a good knowledge of what's happening in the rest of the continent. But I think that there is huge opportunity. You know, in Asia, a lot of the production is actually hydroponic, and although a lot of people aren't aware of that, and I think that that is similar potential in Africa.
Arkendra Narayan is asking, what kind of formulations can be used in hydroponic systems and how is it economically favorable? I think he's talking about the microbiome formulations.
The microbiome formulations, yep.
Yeah.
It's
not very clear, but if it's not what he's asking or she's asking, then I request you, Narayan, to clarify on the question, but let's assume he's asking about microbiome formulations.
Yep. So right now, there are really three different types of microbes that you would add to the system. So one would be microbes that are biocontrol, so they can control disease-causing organisms. The second ones would be beneficial microbes, so microbes that can increase nutrient availability or can reduce the stress in the plants. Third one would be microbes that just improve the health of that hydroponic system, so helps it to operate better. So just like, you know, we think about the microbe in our gut, right? A lot of people are aware that the microbiome in your body contributes to your health. The microbiome in the hydroponic systems also similarly contributes to the health of that system, to make sure that it's operating well, that the nutrients are available, things like pH are maintained. And so these are some of the opportunities. Right now, when inoculants are added, they're added sort of in a very primitive manner, where you see that there's a product on the shelf that has been shown to have some beneficial effect, maybe in soil-grown plants, and you add it to the system because you think it might help in that system. But we still haven't done a lot of fundamental research yet to know what's the best way to go about it.
Okay, and that is what the new project is going to study, right?
Yep, exactly. That's a new project that we're starting right now.
Okay. There is another question here. It says, are there any dangers of algae or mushrooms to veggies grown in hydroponics?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So often you do see algae growing in these systems because, if you think about it, this is a perfect system for cultivation of algae, right? Of abundant light, and you have nutrients, so that can be a challenge. But as far as mushrooms, I don't know if that is a particular challenge. There is certainly a fungal community that is present within those aquatic systems. So yeah, I don't think there's a good view on what the detrimental impact of the algae is.
Then how would you remove the algae? How would you deal with it? Or you don't deal with it?
Yeah, so in some cases they're dealt with, in some cases they're not. And I think that we still don't have a good understanding of what the beneficial or detrimental impact of algal growth is in those systems.
Okay. Kathleen again is asking, do you grow plants from seed, or how do you start a hydroponic crop?
Yep, so growers use different approaches depending on their system and their setup. So many will start from seed. They have their own germination rooms and nurseries where they produce the seedlings, which they then transplant. But in many cases, they will acquire seedlings from growers that specialize in producing seedlings. And there's also quite a bit of grafting that occurs, right? So some of the seedling producers will produce grafted transplants for different systems.
Okay. So Trevor, as we wait for more questions, just a second, maybe. Okay. Kani is just saying that they're just joining in. Someone called Trang. Trang is saying good evening. I think he's somewhere in Asia. And so as we wait for just a few more questions, if there is anything that you would like to add, maybe in conclusion, but also this new project that you have started, given the questions that we have got from our audience, clearly there is an interest in these microorganisms. So when maybe midway during the project and you've gotten some answers and you would like to share some research findings, you could come back to AfS Live and we share that. But also for me as an end user, I would very much be interested in knowing at the very end, what is it that you have learned and how are you going to avail it to these producers, be it in Asia or wherever, so that people can know how to benefit from this knowledge.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can tell you a little bit about the project that we're starting. This is a project in the province of Ontario in Canada, and it's a 2-year project, which is just starting now. And basically what we're doing is we are going to survey the microbiome of vegetable greenhouses, the hydroponic system of vegetable greenhouses. We've already done a little bit of preliminary work, which demonstrates that these microbiomes typically look more like aquatic microbiomes than they do soil microbiomes, as I mentioned before. But basically what we want to do is, we want to go in there and determine what does the microbiome look like. Does the microbiome of a cucumber production facility look different than tomato? And can we detect different pathogens that are present? And then the next step is developing different types of nutrients and nutritional profiles that help to improve the microbiome to keep it in optimal operating shape. And then also different types of bacterial strains. We focus on bacteria, not much on fungi. So different types of bacterial strains that have beneficial properties that we can develop as inoculants. So what we would be providing for the growers are both the ability to survey the system, to know if it is a healthy system, and offer products that will help to keep that system in a healthy operating state. Okay. So that's basically what our strategy is. Okay.
And 2 years is not a very long wait, so we're already anxiously waiting for some answers. Mark, let me see. Yeah, Mark Iradukunda. Yeah, Mark Iradukunda is asking, what are some ways would you recommend students to use to get expertise in hydroponics? Yeah.
So there are actually a number of programs at universities and colleges in North America I know about. I don't know so much about the rest of the world. where you can be trained in this area. And as you know, it is really a mature industry, right? So there, you know, since there is so much food that is produced, and there is a lot of technology involved. So there are training programs that are available for that.
Okay. Trevor, looks like that is all the questions that we've had from our listeners. And we would like to thank you very much for having come on to AfS Live and shared this new project that you're starting as you create this new knowledge. Thank you for sharing this journey with us. And any last remarks as we come to a close?
So I'd just like to say I enjoyed this. The questions were great. Happy to be able to share this area that we're really excited about. And thank you, Patricia, for the invitation and for hosting. And I hope that everybody stays safe out there.
Okay. Thank you, Trevor. Thank you, everyone who has tuned in. And also to just let you know that AfS Live is a public platform. If there is an idea that you would like to discuss, something exciting in your community that you would like to discuss, please send us an email and we could host you, provided it's about science or agriculture, health, technology. This is a platform that you can leverage. So thank you very much and stay safe, you and your families. Goodbye. Trevor, just a moment. Someone is saying, would you please share the video? Oh, yes. This is going to be, this is recorded and we shall avail it on our YouTube page. That is the Cornell Alliance for Science YouTube page. So I would recommend that you give us a week or so. And a week later, maybe by Thursday next week, this should be up on our YouTube page. The video recording, the slides, everything that has been made public. Cornell Alliance for Science, YouTube, you will find it there. Thank you very much.